We want to tell you now about how American test scores have declined for the first time in history, specifically in 9 and 13-year-olds with math and reading scores. The Associate Commissioner for the National Center for Educational Status says she was so shocked by these results, she asked for them to be ran again. And so specifically, math scores have been in decline for the
Hold on a second.
Sorry, Grover.
Sorry, what is the deal with this door?
I don't know. We are super popular today.
Yeah,
not the door.
someone keeps ringing the damn
It's a
doorbell. Don't
warning.
you know?
We
we're
actually
doing
have a
show?
sign that says, "Please do not ring."
Does that what it says? Please do not ring the door.
Do you not read it? You just put it up.
Put it up. Just put it up. I didn't mean it. Grover!
It says, "This is where Clayton receives his Apple Watches." Okay, specifically, these.
Let's start over again. All right.
Shall we we'll just wait 1 second.
Yeah, just wait till he calms down.
Okay.
Let's check in on the chat room for a moment here. Becky Medved says, "Tell him, Grover. By the way, how many new people do we have here on this Friday? Can you flip off the members only chat for a minute here?"
Sorry, I wasn't listening. You want me to flip off the members?
Yeah, flip off the members. Give them the middle finger. No, flip off the members.
That's not a finger, it's a warning.
Flip off the middle finger. Flip off the members only chat for a second on this Friday. And if you're new here, you're new to the show, say I'm new and let us, we're going to take a Grover barking break.
Okay.
We should play a little music, like some fun country music or something like that. While
Are we setting it
this is
to
like a
anyone or
Grover.
subscribers only?
What's that?
Are we setting it to anyone or subscribers only?
Anyone, right?
Subscribers only.
Oh man.
Sorry.
Hang on.
Why
Grover.
don't you just go look? Because the last guy was walking about,
All right.
and I will talk to you.
Okay.
We're just gonna we're gonna have a little interval.
Okay.
A little interval where we talk about what? Okay. I'm going to tell you this story anyway. We'll stay on my camera. Shall we begin?
Yeah.
Okay. We want to tell you now about declining test scores in the U.S. In fact, test scores for math, specifically for grade schoolers, have declined for the first time since the 1970s. That is when we began to record these test scores. In fact, the commissioner of the National Center for Educational Statistics said that she was so shocked when these test scores rolled in that she asked her team to run them again because she couldn't believe it. So what specifically is in decline? Specifically, 9 and 13-year-old math scores have been in decline, and it's the lowest percentile. So 10th, 25th, and 50th percentiles. Those lowest test scores have slipped even lower than they were before. That means that students performing under grade level are now getting lower scores on the same test, so they cannot perform what they are expected to do at grade level. That held true for 9 and 13-year-olds. Also, the number of students that report to read for pleasure was down mostly in the 9-year-old group. Only 10% of 9-year-olds say that they read for pleasure rather than just reading what they're assigned. I find this shocking. This is shocking. Do you find this shocking, Philip?
Not really. I mean, like, honestly, like, but it's like the reading for pleasure is interesting because my daughter does a lot of reading and stuff like that, but not books. Like, so like the way they're consuming basically the same thing is a bit different. But I mean,
what besides books? Like
well,
comic,
I mean,
graphic
I guess
novels?
I guess I would say like mostly anime subtitles because she does read like manga and stuff like that. Like so it's personal interest stuff. So I guess she
But they
doesn't
did
actually
not ask if you're reading books. They ask if you read, right?
Oh.
Reading can be anything. It's not obviously not your text messages or Instagram.
Right.
But do you read? For instance, we were in our parent-teacher conference this week, and our son's sixth grade teacher said, "Look, I'm not picky about what they read in their free time. My brother used to read computer and gaming manuals, and now he's a programmer, and so it counts. What they're asking is, do you read for pleasure, right?" And students are saying, no, it's just not a national pastime for a decreasing amount of children. Not surprisingly, these scores were worse for students of color, specifically Black and Hispanic children. So it proves what we already felt is that there are many children left behind. It is not a no child left behind situation. And before you blame it on the pandemic, these are test scores that are through March 2020. So that
That was
was
good.
when students were still in school. This is as good as it's going to get, because after that, disproportionate amount of kids got no school, especially low-income children. It was really a privilege to have any kind of digital remote learning at all, which most kids did not get. So there is no expectation that this will get any better.
That was going to be the thing I was going to say was, when I first saw this story, I was like, oh, well, it's the pandemic. Of course, these kids are having issues. They're not reading as much. It was a real burden on the family. No, it's
Right.
before the pandemic.
Well, but then how many high income or high performing students and families who will actually read this will say, oh, well, my kid's not in the bottom 50th percentile. My kid's still reading at or above grade level, testing at or above grade level, so we're fine, right? But it's a widening gap, not just of income inequality. It's a widening gap of education now.
Right.
That is, and again, if you're looking at who's testing poorly, it's Black and Hispanic children who are concentrated in low income areas who are not getting equal education.
This little tear sheet here that I think is really troubling. This is one of the things that stood out to me. We are really looking into as much data as we can to try to unpack and unravel what is happening with this gap. That is so pervasive and systemic across all subject matters: reading, math, science, U.S. history. Not just reading and not just math. All subjects. All subjects. I mean, they don't mention recess in here.
It's
like
just,
gym class,
I find
but-
this so heartbreaking.
Well, what's the solution here,
Every child should have equal access, and we sort of, as a society, will write off this sort of bottom percentile, like, well, okay, they have no future.
Right, and then we know lack of education leads to a whole host of issues, right?
In fact, a lack of education shortens the longevity of life. There is data about that. So already there's this subset of children who are going to have poorer health and lower longevity of life. And now less education to even put into that, because the education they lost during the pandemic will not be made up.
So sad. Let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below.
Paul Simon famously said his lack of education never hurt him much. So.
But I think one of the things that actually
In
kind of
song form.
is this idea that when you see a study like this, and I think it because BK Dan said it's a shock to me. He had a $5 super chat. It's a shock to me because my son's 20 and reads for pleasure at that age, and we're in the bottom of income level. And I think this kind of hints at what part of the problem, like why nothing ever gets done, is because we look at these mass studies and then we do an anecdotal evidence of well, no, because I know somebody that doesn't apply to, and then we just kind of
Right.
move on, as
Right.
opposed to
Okay, but let me give you some data. Children who perform the best in school are children who have involved parents. That's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
And if we are a nation of people working 2 and 3 jobs, we don't have time for that, right? It is one of my life's mission to raise readers. And how do I do that? Is I read with them. So I spend a lot of time curating my kids' reading list. And then if I find that they're struggling with something, or something didn't actually catch their interest, or there is something that caught their interest, I will read it too at the same time, so that we can talk about it, so that it becomes this family value. Now, who has time to read the same books as their children, right? That just happens to be something that I want to do. But parents who ask questions, parents who show up to these meetings, parents who go, it's just, we have less time for that, right?
Yeah, if we're working 3 jobs, because it's uniquely American to
Right.
work 3 jobs to put food on our table, we don't have health benefits, then your concern is not reading with your child because you're so friggin' tired, or you're just not even home.
Right. And so it is a lot of work to be involved in your children's education, but it is not something that you can set it and forget it.
It's not trivial.
And
Yeah.
it is rare the child that can succeed as an island, right? In fact, in every parent-teacher conference that we did yesterday, the teachers were talking about how we work together, right? We want your child to advocate for themselves more. So can you work on it at home, right? These parent-teacher conferences are not just the teacher dumping on us what their experience is, trying to put things in our kids' head. They're saying they're learning this way. Basically, in my experience, a parent-teacher conference is the parent asking me to participate, and this is how. Like, get her to do her homework at this time of day, or ask her about her progress about this, or any of that, right? It really matters. And it's too hard to ask people who don't have the time. I mean, I feel like such a jerk saying, like, I read all the same books that my 3 kids do. But it's because I make time for that.
It's
and
sad.
it's important to me.
It's sad.
And I have the luxury of it.
It's sad that makes you feel like a jerk. You know, you should be proud. Like, I read with my kids. I sit down with my son. I'm reading R.A. Salvatore books with him now, the Crystal Shard series. Like, I love it. We love it. I read, the Curious George book last night to my 5-year-old,
Right.
Curious George goes to the chocolate factory, and wouldn't you know it, when the man with the yellow hat told him to stay out of trouble, George, he didn't. So he ate all the chocolate and got a stomach ache. But look, I mean, we're tired at the end of the day. We do this show.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of stuff. We write a newsletter. We do a lot of other work. It's tax day. We're doing other things, producing other videos. And at the end of the day, we're sitting there yawning. And it's like, okay, we could sit there and prop up and not do it or do it. So you shouldn't feel like a chump about it.
But it's harder of a job. I mean, I never raised a child in the 80s, but I know that it's harder for us because our children are overstimulated with electronics than to get them excited about analog learning. Yeah. And there has to be a team doing that.
I want to address some of the people in the chat. Let's see. Wicked Insanity says, my mom read me the Golden books. Oh, yeah, the Golden books. The Golden Key books, right?
Yeah.
Arlene Morrow says that's what makes you educated, the love of reading. What did someone say? Yvonne McCourt says, I read at least one book to the kids each day. Most of the time, it's the same few books. We have hundreds of books. That's awesome.
Yeah. Like my son's 6th grade teacher in her open house, she was like, readers are leaders. I'm like, you absolutely right. And I used to have a professor in college that said, the only thing worse than a person that can't read is a person who won't.
Right. And Richard Blackstone says, I believe that my success in life is because I was an early reader. Love that.
Yeah.
I was a voracious reader growing up. Like I read all the time.
Yeah.
I think I read the majority of Encyclopedia Britannica. Like I would just open them and just read them. I started alphabetically, and so BK Dan had a $5 super chat and said he was a stay-at-home. He was the stay-at-home for my son because his mom was the breadwinner, 2 jobs. Son still loves to read. I really worked that into him and a want to learn.
That's awesome, Dan. I mean, you should be super proud.
I appreciate him saying he worked for it.
Yeah, and you have a son that loves to read. He's 20 and he loves to read. That's because of you, man. That's awesome. I got chills just thinking about that. Like, you've affected this child in that way. Yeah. Someone said, Your Imperial Majesty says, my mother tried and said, never mind, she's reading. So I guess you were always reading. And so they... And then
Yvonne asks, how do I do this with my 5-year-old, reading books with them? Because yes, she cannot read a chapter book by herself. She's only on sight words. Right. But I volunteered in the school library in order to find chapter books that I can start reading to them. For instance, Ivy and Bean, great series. Mm-hmm. Heroes in Training, all of my kids loved that. It's about Greek mythology. There's a new series called Ever After, The Rainbow Magic. So I find these tiny little chapter books that we can finish in like a week or a week and a half, 1 chapter a night. And then they're used to the format of chapter books, and then they slowly take them on themselves. So I actually have a Goodreads list
Goodreads account.
A list called Books for My Children.
But many of you might not know what Goodreads.com even is.
It's a social network for readers, and you mark all of your books there. And I specifically curate like young adult things that I think are good for middle graders, because that's all we've got.
Guys, go sign up for a Goodreads account.
Yeah.
We'll start a show Goodreads account, by the way, too.
Sure.
Stuff that we mention here, we'll put it up on the Goodreads. So we'll do a morning invest list of books that we mention and recommend here. But yeah, follow us on Goodreads. I'm Clayton Morris over there, and you're Natalie Morris over there.
I think I'm just Natalie Morris. Yeah. But like I said, I have some curated books that I think are fun for any age. But again, we have to work for it. What you want to inspire in your child. School is not daycare.
Right.
And so if you send your kid off and you're like, I hope they do the best, right? And that's not to say that parents are lazy. It's that we don't live in an economy that provides parents that much luxury.
Thanks for subscribing to the channel. You can also become a channel member by going to morninginvest.com/join, where you can stick it to the mainstream media and support independent journalism. We're able to bring you the stories that you won't see on any of the major billionaire-backed networks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, everyone.